Tessa Blanchard made her controversial TNA return back in December 2024, and since then her TNA run has been a roller coaster. Many fans haven't forgotten her controversy, and the crowds at TNA shows have let her know. Tessa Blanchard's TNA return thus far has been eventful, like I said, but it's what's coming next for Tessa that is really surprising and shocking to me. So today we talk about all that and more as we discuss the current and future Tessa Blanchard TNA situation. Like the video, and let's get into it. So usually at the start of my videos I like to give context and backstory on everything leading up to this point, but I cannot count how many times I've explained the Tessa Blanchard story, and surely if you're watching this video you already know the Tessa Blanchard story, so for once in my life I'm not going to go on a 5-minute yapping spree explaining a story that you most likely already know. If somehow you don't know what Tessa Blanchard did back in 2020 and the incidents surrounding Tessa Blanchard and her controversy, then watch any of my videos I've made on it already, linked down below, or just read these tweets. This is what Tessa Blanchard was essentially accused of, and where the controversy began. But Tessa Blanchard's first TNA run ended in 2020 during the pandemic. She wasn't able to work the TNA tapings due to her residency in Mexico and all the entry restrictions and all of that. And after she refused to vacate the world title belt and send it back to TNA due to her unavailability for the shows, her contract with TNA was terminated. Tessa Blanchard's wrestling career would go mostly quiet from this moment on, until 2022 when she became a regular roster member for CMLL, one of the biggest companies in Mexico. And that would lead her all the way back to TNA somehow, as in a very bold and brave decision from TNA, they brought Tessa Blanchard back, as at Final Resolution 2024, she would attack Jordynne Grace, officially returning to TNA as a full-time roster member. It was a bold and puzzling move from TNA to bring her back, as she was still a controversial figure and still had heat around her, and there hasn't been much buzz around Tessa Blanchard's wrestling career since she left TNA. Nonetheless, she returned back to TNA television as she was feuding with Jordynne Grace, and they would continue to fight each other week in, week out, leading up to her return TNA match, which took place at TNA Genesis 2025, of course this match being against Jordynne Grace, in what was Jordynne Grace's final match for the promotion. And the match was definitely a roller coaster. Jordynne Grace was an extreme babyface in this match. Obviously a big part of that is the fact that her opponent was Tessa, and as for Tessa's reaction from the crowd, well, she was getting chants of "she's a racist," a chant I have never heard before in wrestling until then. Despite that though, I will say it was a very, very good match. Like, genuinely, it was a really good match. And I guess that's what makes TNA think that this signing is worth it, because despite the controversy surrounding Tessa, she definitely does still bring it in the ring. So yeah, that was a pretty major match and a big way for Tessa to return to TNA by having her go over Jordynne Grace on Jordynne Grace's way out. Jordynne Grace was a huge part of TNA for the last few years, maybe their biggest star. She's a huge loss for TNA, and putting Tessa over on the way out is a big way for Tessa to come in, and I suppose TNA were doing that to try and build Tessa up. But the issue is that Tessa has hardly really done much since. As of recording now, on March the 1st, 2025, she's only had one match since her Genesis match, that being a squash match on just this past week's TNA Impact. The storyline going on with Tessa Blanchard right now is that usually she just comes out for a promo or for an interview, and anytime she is scheduled for a match, she finds a way to flake out and bail at the last minute with some sort of outlandish excuse, or just saying that the people of insert town name here don't deserve to watch her, something like that, you know what I mean. Yeah, like I said, it's mostly just been interviews and promos from Tessa, but we have also seen some interaction between her and the TNA Knockouts roster, as we're actually starting to see Tessa Blanchard blend in with the rest of the TNA Knockouts roster rather than just being kind of isolated on her own like she kind of was at the start of her TNA run. In fact, she's also meshed with the people of the WWE NXT roster with the whole NXT-TNA partnership going on, as she's even had interactions with Ariana Grace on TV. Ariana Grace, if you don't know, is on NXT. Like I said, she's the daughter of Santino Marella, the former WWE wrestler who is also the TNA general manager on screen. So the interactions make sense in kayfabe wise, but I'm just surprised that WWE greenlit this if they did have to approve it, because like I said, Tessa Blanchard is still very controversial, so I'm surprised that WWE would let any of their wrestlers mingle with her. But Ariana Grace isn't actually the only WWE NXT wrestler to interact with Tessa Blanchard so far in TNA, and in fact, the other women's wrestler in NXT who has interacted with Tessa is a pretty major name on the NXT roster. So on the February 20th episode of Impact, the live episode of Impact, Tessa Blanchard was set to have a match on the show and have her return match on TNA Impact. But as per her current storyline, she came out and just said that she's not going to be wrestling tonight, found a way to make an excuse and bail out of it, leading to a confrontation with Santino Marella. Tessa Blanchard in this segment also got very loud "she's a racist" chants once again.
Tessa Blanchard time. A Blanchard doesn't wait in line. As a matter of fact, when I step in this room, you drop whatever meaningless thing is that you're doing. She's a racist. She's a racist. You know what?
Before TNA Knockouts champion Masha Slamovich would come out and then get on the mic and one-up Tessa and say, if you're not going to do this, well, I'll do it. I'll show you how easy it is, as Masha Slamovich went in there and squashed the local jobber. As this then led to Cora Jade, WWE NXT star, who is currently feuding with Masha Slamovich for the belt, come out after the match and take down and attack Masha Slamovich. And on Cora Jade's way out, she even had a little interaction with Tessa Blanchard on the stage, a move that I thought was really surprising to see. I was not expecting to see these two on screen together in 2025. But yeah, it seems as though Tessa is now kind of inserting herself into the Knockouts title division and could be a future challenger for Masha Slamovich. I mean, it was Masha who interrupted Tessa, so there is motivation now for this storyline and a feud there for the title potentially. Of course, Cora Jade is feuding with Masha Slamovich currently for the belt, so maybe Cora Jade could win the belt of Masha, and maybe Tessa versus Masha is a non-title feud first. But in that segment, Santino Marella also ordered that Tessa Blanchard has to wrestle next week or else she will be fired from TNA Wrestling. And so that led to next week on the February 27th episode of TNA Impact, where Tessa Blanchard would finally have her return TNA match on Impact Weekly TV, as she squashed a jobber called Kelsey Heather in about 3 minutes. So yeah, Tessa Blanchard back on the TNA Impact roster now properly with this match here. Slowly but surely they are integrating her back into the women's roster fully. It seems as though once again she's kind of isolated from the rest of the roster in her own sort of Tessaverse. But yeah, that match isn't the interesting match that Tessa Blanchard has had in TNA so far, as future spoilers of TNA Wrestling are coming up here, but Tessa Blanchard on a TNA taping for an upcoming episode set to air on the 13th of March actually did a tag team match on TNA Impact, with Tessa Blanchard actually tagging up on the same team as Cora Jade against Masha Slamovich and Lei Ying Lee, the former Xia Li from NXT. Yeah, seeing Tessa Blanchard in any segment with any of the NXT people, like I said, is quite a surprise to me. The fact that she's in a match with them is very surprising to me. And Tessa Blanchard's next pay-per-view match for TNA is also confirmed, as she will be facing Lei Ying Lee on the 14th of March Sacrifice pay-per-view. And who knows what the future holds for Tessa Blanchard after that. Surely it's got to be involving Masha Slamovich or also potentially Cora Jade, which I would be very shocked to see if they did a program with Tessa Blanchard and Cora Jade, especially following their segment together having "she's a racist" chants directed at Tessa. That surely can't be a good look for WWE, having one of their talents in a segment with Tessa Blanchard who is getting those chants. It's just a risky move for sure if that feud is to go through. And yeah, depending on the result of that match, Tessa Blanchard could be a future challenger for the Knockouts title. I mean, she's already had words and exchanges with Masha, who is the champion. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. It is kind of surprising to see that she's been interacting with the champion this soon though. Either way, as for Tessa's status with TNA have no intention on firing her due to any reports, and are going to continue on with Tessa Blanchard despite all the heat and the chants the fans are giving her. There was also reports that they aren't going to acknowledge the crowd chants, which, to be fair, I think the only way, if they were to acknowledge those chants to make the people doing those chants happy, the only way to respond to them or acknowledge them is to fire Tessa, which if they aren't going to do, then there isn't really any point acknowledging those chants. It would just make everything far worse. So yeah, Tessa Blanchard's return run in TNA so far since she's came back in December 2024 it's been a weird one, a strange one. It's been a different kind of run. It seems TNA throughout her entire run have kind of been testing the waters, seeing how frequently they can use her, have her talking, who they can have her interact with. But the fact she's interacting with NXT stars and the champion and involving themselves in their on-screen business is definitely a surprise to me, and a surprising booking decision from TNA in my opinion. Just definitely not what I was expecting with her so soon into her run. But yeah, like I said, that's everything going on with Tessa Blanchard in TNA. Let me know down in the comments what you think of Tessa Blanchard's run in TNA thus far. And if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to smash the like button on it. I'll see you all in the next one. Subscribe those notifications on so you don't miss that next one. Goodbye, and keep on rolling.